Welcome to our channel, where real-life stories of struggle, hope, and unexpected bonds remind us that family is not always made by blood but by the courage to care for someone when no one else will. Today's story begins in a quiet village where an old woman and a young boy discover that destiny sometimes brings two lonely souls together to build a life no one expected. The small mud brick house at the far edge of the village had always seemed forgotten by the world. Its walls were cracked, its door creaked whenever the wind touched it, and the roof sagged in the middle like an exhausted soldier who had stood too long without rest. For years, only one person had lived inside it, an old woman named Mariam, whose silver hair matched the pale moonlight and whose eyes carried the softness of someone who had suffered enough to become gentle. She had lived alone ever since her husband passed and her daughter married far away, leaving her with only memories to warm her during long winters. She moved slowly, spoke softly, and lived quietly, unnoticed by most. One cold evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and shadows stretched across the village, Mariam saw something unusual outside her door. A small figure curled beside the well, hugging his knees and shivering in the fading light. He looked no older than 10 or 11, his clothes torn, his face smeared with dust, his eyes swollen from crying. Mariam approached slowly, her old bones aching, her cane tapping softly on the stones. The boy did not lift his head, he seemed too tired even to react. When she asked his name, he whispered, "Arif," his voice trembling like a wounded bird. He had come from another town far away, walking for days after losing everything in a fire that destroyed his home. He had no relatives left, no place to go, and no one who would take him in. For a moment, Mariam felt her heart tighten. She recognized that look of silent fear, that helplessness that reminded her of her own childhood when she too had wandered alone after losing her parents. Without another word, she extended her hand. The boy hesitated, then slowly took it. His fingers were cold, thin, and stiff. She led him into her house, wrapped him in the thickest shawl she had, and warmed him with a bowl of lentil soup she had been saving for herself. Arif ate like someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Mariam watched him silently, and something inside her softened even more. She didn't question him further. She only said, "You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow we will think of the rest." Tomorrow turned into many tomorrows. At first, Arif moved around the house nervously, unsure of whether he was welcome. He kept asking if he should leave, if he was causing trouble, if he was taking too much space or food. Mariam always shook her head gently, telling him he deserved warmth and safety as much as anyone else. She never raised her voice, never hurried him, never made him feel less. Slowly, the fear in his eyes began to fade. In the mornings, Arif woke before the sun, sweeping the courtyard and fetching water from the well before Mariam even rose from bed. He carried the heavy pot with both hands, wobbling under its weight but refusing help. Mariam would smile at him with pride when he returned covered in droplets and dust. He learned to light the stove, chop vegetables, and knead dough the way she taught him. The house, once silent, began to echo with the sound of busy footsteps, soft laughter, and warm conversations. As the weeks passed, the villagers started noticing the boy walking beside old Mariam, helping her climb the small hill to the market, carrying the baskets she could no longer lift. Some people criticized, some whispered, and some even told her she should not take in an unknown child, but Mariam ignored them all. She knew what loneliness felt like. She also knew that kindness was a way of healing her own wounds. Arif grew stronger, healthier, and more confident. He spent his afternoons repairing small things around the house, fixing the broken stool, tightening loose hinges, patching the leaking roof with mud. He had quick hands and a sharp mind. Whenever Mariam praised his work, his face brightened with a pride he had never felt before. For the first time in years, he had structure, purpose, and someone who cared whether he came home safely. Winter arrived earlier than usual that year. The cold seeped into the house like an unwelcome guest. Firewood was scarce, and food supplies ran low. Mariam's joints began to ache painfully, and she often coughed at night, her breath rattling like dry leaves. Arif stayed awake beside her, warming her with extra blankets and holding her trembling hands. He refused to sleep until her breathing steadied. Every morning, he walked miles to collect dry branches, even when the icy wind cut his face. One evening, Mariam's condition worsened. She could barely speak, barely breathe. Arif panicked for the first time since meeting her. He wrapped her in layers of shawls and ran to the village healer, begging for help. Tears streamed down his face as he pleaded, promising he would work for him, clean his house, anything, just save her. The healer followed him immediately, moved by the boy's desperation. Through the entire night, Arif sat at her bedside, refusing to let go of her hand. By dawn, Maryam finally opened her eyes. Her voice was faint, but the smile was unmistakable. "You stayed," she whispered. "I will never leave," he replied, wiping his tears. From that day forward, the villagers saw something in the boy they had never noticed before, loyalty deeper than blood. People began bringing them warm clothes, extra bread, and blankets. Someone repaired their broken window. Another gave flour from his own supply. The bond between the boy and the old woman softened the hearts of those who once doubted them. Spring arrived carrying warmth and hope. Arif planted a small garden beside the house with tomatoes, peppers, and herbs. He even planted marigolds for Maryam, insisting they reminded him of her, strong and bright despite harsh seasons. Maryam laughed at his words, brushing his hair gently back from his forehead. She saw in him not just a boy, but someone destined for goodness. Days turned into months. Arif grew taller, stronger, and wiser. He studied under the village teacher, learned to read and write, and dreamed of one day becoming skilled enough to help people the way the healer had helped Maryam. She supported him with every breath she had, telling him he could become anything. He promised her that no matter how far he went, her home would always be his home. They lived each day with gratitude. Their meals were simple, their possessions few, but their hearts were richer than most. The villagers came to admire their bond, a silent reminder that love does not always follow bloodlines. Often, when the evening sun glowed orange across the mountains, neighbors passing by would stop just to watch the sight of Arif and Maryam sitting side by side on the old wooden bench outside their house. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they sat in silence, but always they looked peaceful. One summer evening, Arif asked her if she ever regretted taking him in. Maryam smiled and said she had waited her whole life for someone to fill the empty space in her heart. She told him that he had given her a purpose, a reason to keep fighting each day. Arif lowered his head, fighting the emotion rising inside him. He had lost his family once, but destiny had given him another. Years passed like pages of a quiet book. Arif grew into a young man, and Maryam grew older, her steps slower, her breath softer. But no matter how much time changed them, their bond stayed unbroken. Arif took care of her the way she once took care of him. He cooked for her, read to her, fixed her bed, and sat beside her in the long evenings. She often told him he had become her greatest blessing. One night, when the stars shimmered brightly across the sky, Maryam rested her head on the pillow, her hand wrapped in his, and whispered how grateful she was for every moment she had shared with him. She closed her eyes peacefully, her breathing calm, her expression soft. Arif stayed awake beside her, holding her hand until dawn painted the sky gold. Life had taken much from him, but it had also given him something rare, a love that had shaped him, strengthened him, and taught him compassion. In her memory, Arif continued living with the same kindness she had shown him. He helped villagers, repaired homes, and supported orphans, promising himself that he would never allow another child to feel the loneliness he once felt. The small house at the edge of the village slowly transformed. Arif kept it clean, kept the garden alive, and kept one chair always ready beside the old bench where he and Maryam once sat. The marigolds bloomed every year, bright and golden, a living memory of the woman who had changed his life. Whenever someone asked about his past, he simply said that an old woman with a soft heart and brave spirit had saved a lost boy and given him a home. And that home would always remain sacred to him, no matter where life took him. His story spread across the village, inspiring others to care for those in need, reminding everyone that sometimes family is found in the most unexpected ways. The bond that began with a simple act of kindness grew into a legacy of love that lasted long beyond their lifetimes. Arif lived with purpose, strength, and gratitude, because one old woman had believed in him when no one else did. And through every season, every sunrise, and every hardship, he carried her lessons in his heart, making the world around him a kinder place, just as she had taught him.